Welcome to NTD News. I'm Kevin Hogan. Here are today's top stories. Republican senators say they've not been convinced by the House manager's arguments, and they don't think it'll lead to conviction. Senator Ted Cruz says that all 100 senators in that chamber have at some time used language like Trump did. More updates on the accident in Fort Worth, Texas. We speak to a volunteer at the fire station who went to the scene of the crash. He tells us what he saw. South Dakota deals with the aftermath of President Biden's Keystone Pipeline block. Companies in the local community are working to cope with the lost investment. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo in the hot seat over reports he kept the extent of the state's nursing home virus deaths under wraps. And multiple sources claim the Biden administration's new immigration policy halts a major operation to deport sex offenders. Agents are outraged, saying they can't do their jobs. Have you ever heard one of your local politicians say the phrase, "fight like hell"? Some say that's pretty common. But those three words are central to Democrats' allegations that Trump incited violence at the Capitol. Trump's lawyers, on the other hand, are focusing on three different words: peacefully and patriotically. Senator Ted Cruz criticized House managers on Thursday. He says they've failed to show how former President Trump incited the breach of the U.S. Capitol. He says their presentation contains virtually no argument that would meet the requirements for a conviction, but was designed to be emotional and powerful. House Democrats spent 2 days during the trial laying out evidence against Trump. Some lawmakers are praising their presentation.
I thought the House managers did an incredible job. They not only presented a persuasive case to the Republican senators, but also to the American people.
But some Republican lawmakers and Democrat commentators say the arguments were getting too repetitive and should have been shortened.
I think they're making a movie, They haven't in any way tied it to Donald Trump.
Trump's defense lawyer, David Schoen, called the video presentation offensive and antithetical to the healing process. He says Trump condemned the violence and he thinks it tears at the American people to keep showing it. Representative Jim Jordan, speaking to Fox, notes the House managers highlighted Trump's comment, "fight like hell," numerous times, but left out one central line from his speech.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
Trump's call for a peaceful protest does not support the argument that he incited violence, nor that he told someone to break into the Capitol building.
And so you can say, but for Donald Trump's words, he wouldn't have been there. But that's different than saying Donald Trump is the chief inciter.
Senator Cruz told reporters if Trump's speech constitutes incitement, then every single political candidate in America is guilty of incitement. Cruz stating, "I guarantee you all 100 senators in that chamber have stood on the stump and said we need to fight or fight like hell." House Manager Joe Neguse, in his closing remarks, said when President Trump stood up to that podium on January 6th, he knew that many in that crowd were inflamed, were armed, were ready for violence. Trump's defense attorney, Bruce Castor, says they won't make any adjustments to the defense based on what was presented. He says he doesn't think the Democrats revealed anything new. It was the same information from different angles. Republican senators say they don't feel it's changed their minds. Most will still vote to acquit Trump. Cruz saying on Fox News late Thursday, there's no chance Trump will be convicted. Senator Lindsey Graham indicated the same on Wednesday, saying the not guilty vote is growing after today. Trump's defense lawyers are expected to present their concluding arguments to the Senate on Friday. We have new updates on the horrific accident in Texas yesterday. The death toll has sadly risen, and we learn more about what happened. NTD's Christina Kim speaks to a fire department volunteer who went to the scene.
We've all seen the horrifying images of the 133-car pileup on Texas's icy interstate road, the wreckage spanning over a mile. As of now, officials say at least 6 people were killed. A count from CNN reports 9 deaths. 65 people had to be treated at the hospital for their injuries from the accident.
Never anything like this. This is really unheard of since I've been living in this area, to see a pileup in Fort Worth of this magnitude.
Daniel Enriquez worked with the fire department for over 20 years and went to the scene after the accident. He describes the harrowing scene.
You couldn't even tell it was a pickup truck. I was just crying right there because it was just such a terrible image, just to know that whoever was in there, they didn't make it.
There were many large trucks involved in the accident. Enriquez tells us what he heard from those at the site.
An 18-wheeler actually hit it was like a pickup truck or something so hard that the pickup truck went airborne. These 18-wheelers, they really can't stop, and then when you have to stop on a dime, it's going to keep going. It's going to plow into everything in front of them.
An account told Enriquez some cars were driving very fast despite the bad weather conditions. Some say up to 60 miles per hour. He notes it's crucial for cars to keep enough space between big trucks. Enriquez mentioned 2 factors he thinks contributed to the accident. First, he didn't see any sand on the roads. Typically in inclement weather, roads are sanded the night before or latest morning of to prevent skidding. Second, the express lane was not closed.
Express lane was left open. And that's a big no-no for this kind of weather. That and the sand not being on the ground contributed a lot to the catastrophe that we had.
The express lanes are normally closed during bad weather. If an accident happens, the lane is left so police and emergency responders have a clear path to quickly reach the scene. Enriquez spoke to a police officer on this issue.
And they told me that in their meetings, they were really surprised why were the express lanes open during that time. They should have been closed where nobody drives on it during icy weather.
Enriquez hopes we can learn from this tragedy. Remember to drive slowly, leave space between large trucks, and in bad weather, close express lanes and sand roads beforehand. Reporting by Christina Kim, NTD News.
The canceled Keystone Pipeline was years in the making, with many in South Dakota invested in the project. One of those companies helped bring electricity to the pipeline. NTD's Don Tran talked to the business about how Biden's decision on the pipeline affected them and their community.
At a South Dakota electric company, a huge amount of capital has been put on hold. The company has around $14 million worth of equipment. It's all waiting to be put to use.
I'm here at West Central Electric Cooperative's warehouse, and behind me are 2 sub-transition transformers. Each of them cost $750,000 and have been sitting here since 2013. They were actually scheduled to be sent to one of the oil pump stations to provide more power, but after President Biden canceled the Keystone Pipeline's construction, it looks like these 2 will have to sit back a while longer.
West Central has worked on the Keystone Pipeline since the beginning in 2008, but then one of Biden's first-day executive orders put a stop to their work.
We put a lot of time into it, which, they paid for, but it sure helped us here at the co-op. So yeah, it's a little disappointing to see something like that pulled away with a swipe of a pen and 10 minutes after it's sworn in or whatever, but, I guess it's the way it works in Washington these days. So.
The company wasn't spared of any losses either. Jeff Berklin, the CEO of West Central Electric, is in charge of over 3,000 employees, and they cover over 7,000 square miles of land. He hoped for their work on the pipeline to bring more revenue to deal with the high electricity rates.
What it means to us, had we been able to fulfill our contract and move forward with that power, roughly our members, West Central Electric, we're out $90 million. That's what that means to us.
It also would have given $4 million in state sales tax revenue. For Berklin, the pipeline seemed like the only opportunity to help his members grow, but he's still hopeful for future prospects.
I have to be optimistic. No is not an answer. That's not how I was raised. It's you got a problem, you got to find a solution. We got to work together. There's give and take on both sides, and that's how our country was founded.
Berklin added he understands people's concerns about why the pipeline shouldn't be built, but he thinks stopping the project altogether is not the best solution. Reporting in South Dakota, Don Tran, NTD News.
YouTube has completely removed Lifesitenews from its platform. The pro-life group says YouTube took down all its videos without warning or explanation.
Lifesitenews is the latest casualty of social media censorship. On Wednesday, the pro-life group said YouTube just completely removed the Lifesitenews YouTube channel. This isn't a temporary ban. Every single one of our videos is completely gone. It says it lost access to over 300,000 followers. YouTube told the Epoch Times it took the channel down for repeatedly violating its COVID-19 misinformation policy. It prohibits content promoting alternative prevention methods that contradict the WHO. YouTube said it removes any channel that gets 3 strikes in 90 days. The pro-life group told CBN News it's been facing increasing censorship from YouTube over the past 3 months. Lifesitenews journalist Doug Mainwaring says social media giants have weaponized their platforms against conservatives, and Christians in particular. He writes, if you are a conservative Christian, the tech giants hate you and want to eradicate you. They clearly think that you shouldn't exist. You are being driven out of the modern public square, the internet, where only liberal voices are permitted to speak. In recent months, YouTube has moved to demonetize and suspend accounts, including former President Trump while he was still in office. Lifesitenews says for now you can sign up for email alerts, and you can still find their current videos on Rumble.
Fox News' Tucker Carlson said on the Thursday night episode of the program that he's been targeted for cancellation. He said groups funded by big money are trying to take him down. Carlson said that in the last 24 hours, the calls have grown louder. He says the groups are funded by the Ford Foundation, George Soros, Michael Bloomberg, and Jeff Bezos. He notes they're going after the show's advertisers and after companies that broadcast the show's signal. He said many of the voices who seek to cancel him and the entire Fox News network are also in media, but are serving the interests of the Democratic Party. Over the past several weeks, there has been growing pushback against corporate media over calls to cancel other media outlets and journalists. Twitter suspended the accounts of Project Veritas and its founder, James O'Keefe. Twitter says they violated the platform's policy. That's after O'Keefe asked a Facebook executive a question in front of his home. But O'Keefe said the reason for the suspension is false. Here are the details.
In January, Project Veritas obtained a video of Facebook VP of Integrity saying the platform can freeze threads where they detect hate speech. So James O'Keefe went to the VP's home to ask him for a comment on it. That's a common practice in journalism, showing up to someone's home.
When you talk about freezing comments containing hate speech, what do you mean by that?
After the question, the VP doesn't respond and walks toward his home. Twitter claims the video contains private information. O'Keefe says this is false. Twitter said he needs to delete the tweet to have the temporary lock on their account removed. Twitter allowed O'Keefe to appeal, which he did. Then Twitter responded by suspending his account. The video shows the street number of the VP's house, but it doesn't show the street name. O'Keefe said he will blur the street number in the video. But O'Keefe says this is nothing new from Twitter, and he pointed out that its CEO Jack Dorsey admitted to Congress that the company's decision to block the New York Post's expose of Hunter Biden was wrong. But they still demanded the Post delete their tweet.
House Republicans say House Speaker Nancy Pelosi should have to pay the same $5,000 fine imposed on other House members who bypass metal detectors. They told the security head that Pelosi didn't complete the full security screening on February 4th and that security cameras recorded the evidence. They also told him he can't choose to enforce the rules with some members of Congress and not others. Pelosi had metal detectors installed just outside all entrances to the House floor after the January 6th Capitol riot. She also insisted on the $5,000 fine rule just 2 days before she allegedly skirted the metal detectors. Republican Congressman Louis Gohmert and Andrew Clyde have already been assessed the fine, but they're both challenging the accusations. Talks of possible impeachment spark in Albany. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's administration reportedly withheld death toll data on nursing homes to avoid federal backlash.
The details come from a top aide to Cuomo's administration, who informed Democratic lawmakers in the state. According to a New York Post report, Secretary to the Governor Melissa DeRosa said the administration feared the Justice Department could use the numbers against them. Heavy criticism and talks of impeachment follow the announcement, while New York Congressman Lee Zeldin is calling for a DOJ-led obstruction of justice probe. New York State's Supreme Court ordered that additional data be released. That's in response to a Freedom of Information law request from think tank the Empire Center. The new figures sent the state's nursing home death toll soaring. In a statement, the Empire Center explained the revelations increased the number of known deaths from around 9,000 to nearly 15,000, adding that, quote, the pandemic's toll on long-term care residents was much worse than the Cuomo administration previously portrayed it to be.
U.S. President Biden speaks with the Chinese Communist Party head Xi Jinping for the first time. We take a look at what Biden did in his first 3 weeks to impact China policy.
Experts have been saying President Biden will continue Trump's tough stance on China.
We do think that Joe Biden and his administration will continue a tougher approach to China than.
But one analyst says, judging from recent China policies, the new administration's specific methods are quite different. Biden has taken a hard line towards China's military activities in the South China Sea. That's through sending aircraft carriers and warships to sail through the ocean, sending the message to China that the U.S. does not recognize Beijing's claim to the territory. But on the other hand, the White House recently withdrew a Trump-era rule that require American schools to report their relationships with China's Confucius Institutes. Those are language and cultural classes held outside of China, sponsored by the Chinese regime. They've been accused of spreading pro-CCP propaganda and exporting censorship to U.S. campuses. The new administration also backed off from Trump's efforts to ban TikTok. The social media app is hugely popular among American teenagers, but is owned by a Chinese company. Lawmakers and experts have said the firm may collect sensitive data from American users and submit it to the CCP. President Biden also extended the deadline for American investors to stop buying stakes in Chinese companies with military ties. Former President Trump previously set the deadline for last month.
Biden's strategy, as we have seen in the 3 weeks since he took office, is to deal with the hard power of the Chinese regime and the sharp power of the regime separately.
These terms were coined by American diplomats. Hard power refers to military force and coercion. Soft power means using culture, ideals, and values to influence others. China affairs analyst Tang Junyuan says the Chinese regime's sharp power is different from both of the above.
It is actually a comprehensive use of information warfare, public opinion warfare. It's to infiltrate the other side's economic, political, cultural, and scientific fields. The goal is to gain control over the fields and then influence the other country's policies or even achieve complete control.
He believes China actually relies more on Confucius Institute's TikTok and American investment to advance its conflict with the U.S. than through military means.
Those are the areas where they can gain practical benefits, because we know that the risk of a direct military conflict between the United States and China is extremely low. So the U.S. and China sending warships, etc., are more of a political declaration.
He said the previous administration has been trying to decouple with China in a number of fields, including the development of sensitive technology.
As long as you are connected in these areas, you can hardly avoid the CCP's use of various ways to take advantage of the openness of Western liberal and democratic societies to infiltrate and dismantle you, from within. So decoupling in these areas, in my opinion, is the most effective way.
But it remains to be seen whether it's likely to happen. A senior China policy official from the Biden administration said in a panel discussion that the U.S. and China should take small steps to form a workable relationship.
For both sides to stop, take a deep breath, perhaps step back a little bit, reflect, but there may be things on visas, on journalists, on consular outposts. There are a number of things that you could imagine that could be potentially helpful.
He could be referring to reversing some of Trump's policies. The policies include restricting visas for Chinese Communist Party members, expelling Chinese state media journalists, and closing Chinese consulate that allegedly served as spy outposts. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
The Biden administration gave new guidance that cancels planned nationwide operations targeting at-large sex offenders. Law enforcement, including deportation authorities, now have to reevaluate their plans.
Former ICE acting director Tom Homan tells Fox News that ICE was planning an operation to target and deport convicted sex offenders, including child molesters. Now the operation is blocked because of new rules issued by the Biden administration. Biden promised in his campaign to reverse former President Trump's immigration policies. Biden's acting director of Homeland Security, David Pekoski, issued a memorandum curtailing the ICE operation. Holman calls the memo the most anti-law enforcement, pro-criminal policy that he can ever imagine in his worst nightmare. He says the new policy will stop ICE from deporting 95% of the criminal cases they usually would. Holman says that Biden has declared the entire country a sanctuary jurisdiction, meaning people will be raped and victimized by criminals who should not even be in the U.S.
A newly released poll suggests over 2/3 of Republicans would join or consider joining a Trump-led third party. 33% say they would. Another 37% chose maybe. Some pollsters speculate that if Trump did form a new party, it would instantly become bigger than the GOP. Nearly 3/4 of respondents say it's important for the Republican Party to remain loyal to Trump. The poll comes as Trump's facing a trial in the Senate. If Republican senators vote to impeach him, it's likely they'll face blowback from voters in their home states, and they may find themselves challenged in the upcoming primaries. Coming up, Disney's facing backlash after firing an actress over her social media posts. The actress compared hatred directed at Trump supporters to that towards Jews before the Holocaust. And students at the University of California, Berkeley are confined to their dormitories for at least another week over a CCP virus outbreak. Find out more after the break.
Someone has to find the way to build the Great Dome. Completely new, completely original.
마루 유치원 폐쇄 명령서입니다.
전 폐쇄 명령 받아들일 수 없습니다.
유치원 폐쇄 명령이라.
학생 들어간 건 어떻게 됐어? 도저히 방법이 없대?
정일도 사장님을 대신해서 제가 대신 말씀드리면 안 되겠습니까?
Lucasfilm, a company that Disney owns, has fired Mandalorian actress Gina Carano. That's because she compared the hostile political climate in the U.S. to the one that led up to the Holocaust. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
I love this character so much.
Carano's post read, Jews were beaten in the streets, not by Nazi soldiers, but by their neighbors, even by children. Because history is edited, most people today don't realize that to get to the point where Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first made their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jews. How is that any different from hating someone for their political views? The post outraged some, and the hashtag #FireGinaCarano was trending on Twitter on Wednesday before her firing. This was not the first time Carano's posts have met with controversy. She's also made fun of the idea of wearing multiple masks and putting preferred pronouns in your Twitter bio, a move that some found highly offensive. In a statement, a Lucasfilm spokesperson accused Carano of degrading people based on their cultural and religious identities and called her social media posts abhorrent and unacceptable. Carano has also been dropped as a client by United Talent Agency. But people are supporting Carano too and calling Disney's values into question. Financial commentator and CEO Peter Schiff wrote, "As a Jew, I am not offended by the Gina Carano tweet referencing Nazi Germany. But as an American, I'm very offended by the left's reaction. Lucasfilm firing her to appease an intolerant left-wing mob merely validates her comparison. We must learn from past mistakes, not bury them." A number of others questioned why Disney didn't have the same reaction to a similar post by actor Pedro Pascal, who was in the same movie as Carano. In 2018, he shared this photo, comparing children being held in temporary border patrol processing facilities to Jews being held in concentration camps. It was also pointed out that the bottom photo was not taken in America. Meanwhile, some left-leaning voices say that Carano's firing is not cancel culture, but instead consequences and adult accountability. Since the news of Carano's firing broke, #CancelDisney+ has been trending on Twitter. Reporting by Grace Coulter, NTD News. Florida's governor is pushing back on a potential Biden administration plan to restrict travel to and from the state. The governor says travel rights for Americans can't be constrained.
Restricting the right of Americans to travel freely throughout our country while allowing illegal aliens to pour across the southern border unmolested would be a ridiculous but very damaging farce.
The governor says Florida isn't the problem and that the state has lower case numbers per capita than many others. He also says domestic travel restrictions would be unconstitutional. The UK variant of the CCP virus has recently surged in Florida and California. Senator Marco Rubio wrote a letter to President Biden calling domestic travel restrictions authoritarian moves. He added the administration should focus on getting the vaccine out instead, and pointed out that travel restrictions would further damage the economy. A virus-sniffing dog is helping keep students safe. The dog sniffs out school spaces at Florida International University. Her name is One Betta, and she is part of a unique program. One Betta is a dog with a mission. The furry friend got the job after taking part in a task force at the university developed to train dogs to detect the CCP virus. One Betta is one of many dogs playing a role in the fight against the CCP virus. NBC News says the Miami Heat basketball team has employed virus-sniffing dogs too. If a dog sits down in front of a patron and signals the presence of the CCP virus, the patron will not be allowed to enter the arena. Students living in campus dorms at the University of California, Berkeley are being asked to stay in their rooms for another week. Here's more from California with NTD's Eileen Eng.
UC Berkeley students need to self-sequester for another week until at least February 15th due to coronavirus concerns. Outdoor exercise is banned, and both campus security and police officers will monitor residence buildings. Students are asked to remain in their rooms at all times, except if they need medical attention, to get tested, or to get food. They are also asked to pick up lunch and dinner at specified times and use the bathroom on their assigned floor. Out of almost 13,000 individuals, over 220 students and staff have tested positive for the virus since January 31st, according to the school's website. We tried talking to the few students who were out and about. However, they were told not to provide any statement to the media. Eileen Eng, NTD News, California.
And just ahead, the U.S. is set to continue giving relief aid to American schools partnered with Chinese entities. This after Democrats voted not to cut federal relief funds for those schools. And China bans the BBC from airing its programs in the country. The retaliation comes after British media regulators revoked the broadcast license of a Chinese propaganda organ. That and more after the break.
It's just clear as day. The media, whether it's broadcast, cable, or print media, has become extremely biased. And I started looking online for alternative ways to get information. And I saw an ad for a free trial. And I looked at it and I said, Epoch Times? I mean, come on, this is end of days type of stuff. I mean, what are they going to be talking about here? And I said, well, it's a free trial. Let me dig in. Is it giving me both sides? Is it giving me an objective point of view here? I have looked for opportunities to see where they might be biased, and I don't find it. It has given me a level of trust in media that I didn't think I'd ever get back. I love the Epoch Times because it has renewed my faith in the idea that a reliable, responsible, non-biased source of information is available. And I can say that I love it because of that.
Republicans are going back to the drawing board. That's after Democrats voted to give money to education institutions that partner with the Chinese Communist Party. After a 13-hour-long hearing, they struck down an amendment that would have prevented these schools from getting federal relief funding. NTD's Christina Kim has those details.
In a party-line vote, the Democrat-controlled Education and Labor Committee tossed Representative Elise Stefanik's amendment to Biden's pandemic relief bill. It would have denied schools federal money if they were tied to Chinese entities and communist affiliates. This essentially means that schools will still be given taxpayer money even if they partner with the Chinese Communist Party or CCP. This comes after Biden quietly nixed Trump's policy that would have required colleges to disclose ties to Confucius institutes, CCP-funded school partnerships considered to be a part of Beijing's arm to promote communist propaganda. China analyst Gordon Chang says the U.S. is being overwhelmed.
I think hundreds of thousands of collectors of information that China has in our country. It's not just their Ministry of State Security agents. It's their tourists. It's their business people. It's their students who are interviewed when they go back to China. They collect information, 1,000 grains of sand approach.
Introducing the measure to the committee, Republican Representative Stefanik said, quote, "The Chinese Communist Party will do everything possible to steal our intellectual property and research, compromise our professors, and even recruit individuals on campus for espionage." In addition to this measure, Democrats and the Biden administration have indicated they want to cooperate with China on certain issues like climate change and the pandemic. Cheng says this strategy won't work.
How can we cooperate with a government that means to overthrow us? It just doesn't seem to make sense. And the Communist Party has been very clear. They say that if you don't cooperate with us on everything, we're not going to cooperate on anything.
Cheng lays out the strategy he believes the U.S. should take.
And I think the way that we should be approaching this is to cut all ties with China, because China uses every point of contact with the United States to undermine our society, overthrow our government.
Stefanik said higher education is valued for open thought and expression and being a place for innovation and learning. But the Chinese Communist Party sees these institutions as, quote, forums for communist brainwashing and censoring speech, and unfortunately, a marketplace for intellectual theft. She says Democrats are putting China first and America last. Christina Kim, NTD News.
China barred Britain's BBC World News from its television networks, and Hong Kong's public broadcaster said it would stop relaying BBC World Service radio. That's a week after Britain revoked a Chinese state television station's broadcast license.
British television channel BBC World News was barred from airing in China on Friday. This came just 1 week after Britain's media regulator revoked Chinese state television, CGTN's, license to broadcast in the United Kingdom. China's National Radio and Television Administration said an investigation found BBC World News' China coverage had harmed the country's national interests and undermined unity. The agency added that the channel, quote, seriously violated regulations, and its application to air for another year would not be accepted. The English-language news channel is not prolific in China and only appears in some hotels and residences. But 2 Reuters journalists in China confirmed the channel had gone blank on their screens. The BBC said it was, quote, disappointed and defended its news reporting as impartial, fair, and without fear of favor. British Foreign Minister Dominic Raab condemned China's move, calling it an unacceptable curtailing of media freedom. He added, this latest step will only damage China's reputation in the eyes of the world. At a regular news briefing, U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price commented,
It's troubling that as the PRC restricts outlets and platforms from operating freely in China, Beijing's leaders use free and open media environments overseas to promote misinformation.
Last week, Britain revoked CGTN's license to broadcast in the UK after finding it was wrongfully held by Star China Media. China criticized the ruling as politically motivated and said they reserved the right to make a necessary response.
Arrests of Chinese communist spies in the U.S. are making headlines more and more often. Many Americans are now alarmed by Beijing's espionage operations. An expert tells us more about what's especially deceptive about Beijing's tactics.
The Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, recruits non-Chinese people as spies. Not many people realize it's part of their strategy. An expert explains.
They have recruited or tried to recruit non-Chinese since at least the 1930s. If somebody tells you that they only recruit Chinese people, don't listen to them.
Brazil highlights the example of the 1930s American journalist Edgar Snow. Snow's book greatly influenced Americans' perception of the CCP.
The book that became the bestseller that Edgar Snow wrote after his trip to Baoan and the communist redoubt there, Red Star over China, is arguably the first major CCP intelligence international influence operation.
Brazil also points to more contemporary examples of foreign recruits. He says foreigners have always been a target of CCP intelligence when they were within reach.
The 1,000 Talents program seems to be a mix of open recruitment of academics to return to China and teach, and more clandestine activities, highlighted by the case of Charles Lieber, not a Chinese national. Charles Lieber, the former chair of Harvard's Chemistry and Chemical Biology Department, whose work had defense applications.
Brazil adds that many of the targets are recruited outside of China through online platforms such as LinkedIn. At the same time, he believes the U.S. needs better screening for people entering the country to determine who could be a spy working against the U.S.
A city in North China has been downgraded to low risk regarding its infection rate of the CCP virus. But lockdown measures haven't been loosened. That's as locals say they're enduring virus vaccine side effects that authorities won't report. NTD's Li Shanshan has more.
Nangong City in Hubei province has been downgraded to a low-risk area for CCP virus infection. But authorities there are still carrying out measures designed for high-risk regions. People still aren't allowed to go out after being confined to their homes for more than a month. Vaccination has also been made mandatory for all citizens, except for those over 60. Some locals told us they noticed side effects after being vaccinated, but authorities failed to report the after effects. Nangong City resident Mr. Lin says he believes the fight against the pandemic is all about politics. The officials downgraded the city to a low-risk level because they don't want to be criticized by higher-level officials for failing to combat the virus. That's because too much criticism could cost them their jobs. To protect Mr. Lin's identity, we distorted his voice.
Now the risk level has been reduced to low, but it's still being handled as a high-risk area. All doors are still sealed up. They don't allow people to go out. When people go out, the police will arrest them, detain them.
Lin explains people there were forced to accept the vaccine.
People from 18 to 59 must be vaccinated. It's also the case for children above 3. If they don't get the vaccine, they won't be allowed to go to school. People will not be allowed to go to work either. The authorities have power. You have to obey them. Without the vaccination, you are not even allowed to go shopping. Everyone has a vaccination document. That shows if you've been vaccinated.
Another resident said he and his classmate endured side effects after being vaccinated.
I had allergic reactions on my face after being vaccinated. My face was itchy, very itchy. My arm ached for the whole day. The next day, I did not dare to get the next dose. I was vaccinated along with my classmate. He got a very bad headache that evening.
None of the side effects have been reported by local media. Confirmed cases in Hubei province are still on the rise. Many highways in the province have been closed, while those traveling ahead of Lunar New Year celebrations have been blocked on highways. Reporting by Li Shanshan, NTD News.
Still to come, Colombia's flower industry getting ready for Valentine's Day. It hopes American demand will give a much-needed boost. And looking for a new way to build a home? You might just want to try printing one. Find out more when we come back.
Why are millions of Americans moving their money into gold and silver? It's simple. The world has never been more unpredictable. The biggest economic crisis we've faced since 2008, and a government that's about to print trillions and trillions of dollars. That's why so many Americans are turning to gold and silver to protect their nest egg. American Hartford Gold is a trusted name to help families to safeguard their wealth. With an A+ rating from the BBB and 5-star ratings on the biggest review websites like Trustpilot and Google, American Hartford Gold can help you convert any qualifying IRA or 401k into precious metals. Or they'll help you to easily purchase physical gold and silver and deliver straight to your doorstep. Learn how you can protect your wealth with gold and silver today. Get this free 2021 information guide. Call 866-893-1493 or text TV to 65532.
Shares of Taiwan Semiconductor are up over 4%, and so are some other chip-related stocks. There's a major shortage, of course, and now U.S. chip makers are urging President Biden to strengthen domestic production and stop the U.S. from losing its edge. Here's our latest financial and business news on jobs and the economy.
US chip CEOs want Biden to fund domestic production. They're asking him to include funding for chip factories in his stimulus package in the form of grants or tax credits. They say the United States used to make 37% of the world's chips in 1990. Now it's down to only 12%. Most chips are now made in Taiwan or South Korea. They write, This is largely because the governments of our global competitors offer significant incentives and subsidies to attract new semiconductor manufacturing facilities, while the US does not. They say US leadership in the industry is at risk, and they need to stay competitive in the technologies of the future like artificial intelligence, 5G and 6G, and quantum computing. China is currently heavily investing in its own chip industry. National security concerns about Chinese tech companies means the US won't want Chinese chips. So strengthening US domestic manufacturing is one way to protect these security concerns. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
If you could take your eyes off the soaring stock market for a moment, you'll see that businesses are really still struggling, even the big ones. One of America's biggest publishers, Condé Nast, is withholding millions of dollars of rent from the One World Trade Center. It wants a rent reduction. NTD's Tom Ozimek has the details.
The Wall Street Journal reports that publisher Condé Nast is withholding $2.4 million in rent at the One World Trade Center. Condé Nast publishes titles like GQ, Vogue, Wired, and The New Yorker. It's struggling with falling revenue amid the pandemic and skipped its January rent payment. The company reportedly wants to cut its square footage and reduce rent per square foot. A spokesman told the Wall Street Journal that the company is in discussions with the co-owners of One World Trade Center about resolving the rent dispute. The publisher wants its lease to be brought into line with current market conditions. The Port Authority, which co-owns One World Trade Center, said it plans to enforce full payment. New York City's commercial real estate market faces mounting pressure. The city was one of the hardest hit by the outbreak, with shutdowns emptying offices and restaurants and closing theaters and shops. Last year, a Wells Fargo report found that property values of over 100 struggling New York buildings fell by an average of 27%. A recent bond document filing says Condé Nast could withhold more money in coming months. Tom Ozimek, NTD News.
The Colombian flower industry is busy getting ready for Valentine's Day in the U.S., and it's working hard to meet American demand. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Valentine's Day is the busiest time of year for Colombian flower farmers and exporters. They're hoping this year is no exception. The pandemic has brought new challenges to the industry and disrupted global supply chains. But Colombian flower growers are still hopeful American demand will give them a much-needed boost.
On this Valentine's Day, we hope to bring that message of joy, friendship, love to thousands of people and homes around the world, but particularly in the United States, which is also going through a very difficult time.
Colombia is the world's second biggest flower exporter and main supplier of flowers to the U.S. market. This Valentine's Day, the South American country is hoping to ship some 700 million flowers, mostly roses, to the U.S. Despite the pandemic and global economic crisis, in 2020, Colombian flower exports totaled $1.3 billion US and nearly 230,000 tons. Both are down about 5% compared to 2019.
Many people want to somehow have contact with nature, and flowers are the most expeditious and economical element they can get for that direct contact with nature. That's why we're seeing the consumption of flowers around the world strengthening.
According to Soga Flores, Colombia's flower industry employs some 140,000 people. The United States represents 80% of the Colombian flower market. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
If you're looking to buy an affordable home in New York, you might be interested in this one. This $300,000 house came out of a 3D printer. NTD's Evelyn Lee has more details.
The future is here. The first 3D printed house hits the market in the U.S. While it's revolutionary at first glance, it doesn't look much different from the other houses in the area.
It's very similar to your typical concrete built home you may see down south in Florida.
The home was built on Long Island by SQ4D, and it's the first 3D printed structure to receive a certificate of occupancy nationwide in an area that has some of the strictest building codes in the country. Stephen King, the listing agent, says his phone is ringing off the hook with customers that have burning questions about the house.
Serious buyers who can't believe that a new construction build is in their price range of $300,000. So some of the questions we get asked about it is if it's a modular home if it's manufactured and then assembled on site, which it is not.
He explains that the printing machine is assembled on site. It then goes around to print out the house layer by layer. The walls are made of 2 inches thick concrete. And with the current snowstorms and cold climate in New York, King says the 3D printed house is doing just fine.
The insulation factor is incredible. So traditional homes right now that are built new construction cannot compete with our designed insulation technology.
While it is the first house for sale on the open market, it is not the only one of its kind. In Texas, the company Icahn printed 6 houses for the homeless in a village outside of Austin. And in Germany, a 3D printer is working on an entire residential building. 5 families will be able to live in it after completion. While 3D printing is one of the solutions to the ongoing housing crisis, it does not entirely replace traditional construction. And governments are yet to update regulations, building codes, and establish universal standards for inspection. Evelyn Lee, NTD News, New York.
Coming up, Germany extends its virus lockdown restrictions as concern grows over more infectious variants of the virus. And he's the oldest man to row across the Atlantic solo. What started with a conversation in a pub now looks set to raise over $1 million for charity. That and more when we return.
If you're like me, and I think it's actually most of us, then you're getting really fed up with the nonsense going on inside the banking system. I mean, we've worked hard our entire lives to retire comfortably. We just recovered from the crash of 2008, and it seems like it's about to happen all over again. Look at the too-big-to-fail banks. They're only getting bigger as the Fed hands them trillions of dollars daily, while simple folks like you and me, we're only getting the short end of the stick. That's why I'm glad I found this book called The Bank Failure Survival Guide. Give us a call, and we'll send you a free copy with no obligations whatsoever, just one American to another, telling you about some options that you might not have considered. Call 866-239-2619 today for your free copy of the Bank Failure Survival Guide. That's 866-239-2619.
Hundreds of protesters gathered at the Chinese embassy in Burma's largest city of Yangon. They accuse Beijing of supporting the military. China denies the claims.
Several placards held by protesters at the embassy featured a caricature of Chinese President Xi Jinping operating a puppet of Burma's military leader. The Chinese embassy gave no immediate response. It earlier dismissed reports on the internet of Chinese planes bringing in technical personnel. Amid the protests, at least 6 more officials linked to Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy were forcibly taken from their homes overnight. While Western countries have strongly condemned the February 1st coup, Beijing has referred to it as a cabinet reshuffle.
Germany will extend its lockdown until March 7th. The country's virus infection rates are dropping, but concerns are growing over the variants that are more infectious.
Experts tell us that it is only a matter of time until these variants become dominant and oust the original virus. We have to prepare for that.
The lockdown extension allows for some flexibility. Hair salons are allowed to reopen on March 1st, and different regions can decide whether to reopen their schools and daycare centres earlier. Some opposition parties criticised the extension as disproportionate. Merkel stressed the next weeks will be existential.
Children are suffering from anxiety and depression because of pandemic restrictions. That's according to a survey in Germany, which found about 1 in 3 German children are affected. The survey of children between the age of 7 and 17 found they have more problems in school, their families argue more, and their relationships with their friends are deteriorating. They also don't eat as healthy, spend more time online, and play fewer sports. Researchers questioned over 1,000 children and 1,500 parents from mid-December to mid-January when Germany was under its second lockdown. 70-year-old Frank Rothwell just became the oldest man to row solo across the Atlantic. The grandfather of 3 is also set to raise $1.4 million for charity. NTD's Earl Rhodes has the story.
Already an experienced sailor and a survivor of prostate cancer, Frank Rothwell signed up for the Atlantic Challenge following a chance conversation in a pub. He says one of the biggest challenges was to cope with the boredom, though he was able to phone his wife every day.
Rowing is really, really boring. Every stroke is the same as the last stroke, and there's no seascape, there's nothing to pass.
With a fall overboard potentially fatal, and with no one around to help, rowers must attach themselves to their small boat at all times and prepare their own food. One of the biggest luxuries is a roof over their heads at night, thanks to a small cabin.
Stroke after stroke after stroke, thousands of strokes, another thousands of strokes, a million strokes. And then you're looking at the clouds and trying to imagine what shapes you can see in the clouds.
The race traverses the Atlantic from the Canary Islands to Antigua, about 3,000 miles.
56 days.
Rothwell's time of 56 days, 2 hours and 41 minutes saw him finish 4th out of 8 in his particular category. But he became the oldest man to complete solo feat in doing so.
And I realised it wasn't a race for me. I win by finishing. Seeing an opportunity to raise money for a charity that's desperate for funds.
Rothwell says what he missed most was his wife of 50 years and an ice-cold Coca-Cola. His Just Giving page has received nearly £900,000. But with publicity growing about his epic 56-day journey, he expects to break 7 figures at the weekend. Earl Rhodes, NTD News.
And up next, a great American ski champion becoming emotional. We take a look back at his remarkable career. And today marks the beginning of the Lunar New Year. People gather in the Taiwanese city of Taipei and pray for a healthy and happy start to 2021. Stay tuned to find out more. American ski racer Ted Ligety is retiring after next week's World Championships in Italy. He got emotional while looking back at his career. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Olympic champion ski racer Ted Ligety, 36, says he's fulfilled his childhood dreams, and now he's ready to leave the tour after 17 years.
Yeah, it's every emotion. I mean, it's pretty crazy to be on this tour for 17 years and now walking away and think about how much my life has changed over the years, and think of everything I've done is pretty surreal,
He tears up when trying to thank everyone who helped him along the way. Ligety has 5 World Championship golds, 3 in giant slalom in 2011, 2013, and 2015, as well as Super G and combined in 2013, and 2 bronzes. His golden triple in Schladming, Austria in 2013 made him the first male skier to win 3 or more at a single championship since France's Jean-Claude Killy took 4 in 1968. He won his first Olympic gold during the 2006 Games in Turin, Italy. 8 years later, he won his second in Sochi. He leaves after 336 World Cup starts, 25 wins, and 52 podiums across 5 events.
It's hard for me to say what my legacy is. I think it's hard for somebody to write their own legacy. So hopefully, inspired kids to push hard and ski fast and love the sport of ski racing more. And,
The father of 3 said he plans to spend more time with his wife and kids. He also made it clear he doesn't intend to transition into coaching. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Today marks the start of the Lunar New Year. In Taiwan, people offered prayers for a healthier and happier 2021. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Taiwanese gathered at the historic Buddhist Longshan Temple in Taipei on Friday to celebrate the first day of the Lunar New Year. People prayed for good fortune and health.
I think the pandemic is really bad. I'm not Taiwanese. I cannot go back home because of this pandemic. I can only stay here during the New Year holidays. I hope the pandemic quickly goes away so we can all travel again.
2021 is the year of the ox on the zodiac calendar. 2020 was the year of the rat. The temple saw slightly less visitors this year due to the pandemic. Taiwan has been applauded for its swift and sustained efforts to contain the virus. The East Asian country has recorded just over 900 confirmed cases and only 9 deaths.
Taiwan did a good job of preventing the epidemic, right? Taiwan is #1 in the world. Everyone should be brave in fighting the pandemic and live on strong. It's good to be alive and reverse the situation. Prosperity to all, and everyone makes money. Happy New Year.
Lunar New Year holidays in Taiwan started on February 10th and last until February 16th. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And that's all for now. Catch us again tonight at 6:30 Eastern. I'm Kevin Hogan.
Hi there. A quick update. Social media has some new restrictions which might affect your access to our channel. If you want to stay tuned, make sure you visit us directly at ntd.com. We'll also have a newsletter coming out soon and you can sign up for that now, so stay in touch. Thanks for watching.